I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant, question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of my end of the year show special. Today, my guest and I answer questions that you, the viewers, posted on social media. So sit back and enjoy. The world according to Jesse. Dr. Stephen Greer is a medical doctor and founder of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Dr. Greer, welcome back to the show. Great to have you back.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
Well, one day after you appeared on my show last year, the New York Times revealed for the first time that the Pentagon spent $22 million on a secret UFO investigation project. You alluded to the existence of this advanced aerospace threat identification program in your movie Unacknowledged. How do you feel now that the government acknowledges its existence?
Well, you have to realize that the documentary Unacknowledged, as well as the book by the same title, Unacknowledged, became the #1 documentary for 2017. So there was so much information going out to the public that I think the government's trying to get ahead of the curve by leaking some information, such as that particular case where there was a fighter jet chasing an UFO off the coast of California. We have much more detailed information about that, by the way, and we don't have time to go into it. But it just shows that whatever you think the government is doing on this, there's 1,000 times more. It's not 22 million. It would be in the $200 to $300 billion a year, actually going into what are called unacknowledged special access projects.
Now, Stephen, you sent me some interesting topics to discuss. One of them is about an alleged underwater UFO base off Guam. You say Navy SEALs, of course, which are the Navy frogmen, and other Navy personnel have reported encounters there. Is that right? Tell me about that. What is going on? I'm a former Navy frogman.
Yes, I'm aware. That's why I was going to ask you if this is anything that had ever come across your radar screen while you were in the Navy, or not. But
no, this is all new to me. Go ahead and talk.
Well, we have a new top secret witness who was on a Coast Guard cutter that was called in very quickly to a site where a Taiwan fishing vessel had caught in its net a 20 to 30 foot diameter disc, and they were retrieving it, and they successfully got this out of the water. It was extremely heavy, so heavy that the buoy ship that this gentleman was on was tilted at 45 degrees trying to hoist it on board. And this became very top secret. It was an extraterrestrial vehicle, and apparently this gentleman who has come forward with his testimony and all of his Department of Defense documentation as to who was with him and who the CO of the ship was, says that once he got to shore and began talking to people, that there were a number of Navy SEALs and other Navy personnel that have seen over the years many of these ET craft going in and out of the area near the Marianas Trench, which, as you know, is the deepest point under the ocean. So this has actually just come to light in the last month or two. We're putting the documentation together about it. But that I was curious if you had ever run across this. And in his talking to other Navy SEALs who are read into this particular project and ones that had happened before, he realized that there was a lot of activity in that area south of Guam.
That's interesting, Stephen. Now, I never dove in Guam. I did land there when I was deploying overseas for my first deployment. But then we spent the night there, but then we took off and headed off to Subic Bay in the Philippines after that.
Right.
I dove all over Southeast Asia, the Philippines and all that. But I have to tell you, the only encounter I ever heard of was in Subic Bay, and I don't think it was a UFO. We were swimming out to Grandy Island, and one of my teammates, something passed right underneath him when he was on the surface that blackened out the whole bottom. but I got a feeling it might have been a large manta ray or something else, because
Right,
we
right.
do swim in there. Yeah, we do swim with a lot of normal underwater, should we say, neighbors and all that when we're in there. But no, I have to personally tell you, I cannot in my career ever state that I saw anything under the water. And I did dive around the world in many places, but I never saw anything under the water that was unexplainable to me.
Right. Well, ask some of your buddies. If you ask enough people, you're going to find they have, but they usually are
Really?
they are told never to speak about it. For example, we have a man who was on a nuclear submarine that was on a mission looking for these underwater ET craft, and they had a lot of specialized gear tracking it, but they were tracking these objects going 450 knots underwater without wake. And the way you do that is through the special kind of field propulsion that they use. But I have a great deal of detail on those sort of cases that deal with nuclear submarines tracking these objects deep under the oceans. But these are very classified operations. If they happen incidentally, the people who are involved are forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement for 70 years, blah, blah, blah. Now, in my case, what I've been able to do is get enough. I have now over 900 military and intelligence people who've come forward with these sort of encounters, because we discovered that the underlying projects are being run illegally, up to and including lying to the President and Congress about it, as well as top brass at the Pentagon that I have briefed. I mean, I briefed the CIA director, Bill Clinton's first CIA director, R. James Woolsey, and he and the President were completely being deceived on this subject, even though I had documentation about it. And when they made a directed inquiry into it, they were basically told to jump off a cliff. So there are some operations going on that are really dangerously secretive, to the point that folks have no idea. And they're very large.
Wait a minute,
projects.
Stephen. Stephen, wait a minute. Time out. Time out a second. You mean you took this to the President? And
Yes.
the President inquired about it and was told basically it's none of his business?
Correct. I will take a polygraph.
That's
to that
amazing.
effect. Yeah.
That is utterly amazing.
It
Now,
should scare the hell out of anyone who
piggyback-
just understands what I said. You, as a military guy, more than anyone, is going to understand the danger of this.
I'm astounded over that. I mean, that's the commander-in-chief. That's the head of the country. How can he possibly be told he can't know about something?
Well, you know, I had a man on Ronald Reagan's national security staff who knew about this subject. He says, we tell the old man what we want to tell him. And when we want to lie to the President, we lie to him. He was very cynical. It's very Washington. And this is the sort of thing, this is why I left my medical career. You know, I'm a trauma doctor, emergency doctor, because this is an enormous threat to our democracy. People have no idea how dangerous these projects are.
Wow. Now, you say you've been underwater with UFO events involving our nuclear submarines.
No, I haven't. I have people on my team who have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, are we really tracking UFOs underwater? Explain why you believe this is happening and who's keeping track, and has it exactly been verified?
Yeah, there's a highly compartmented operation within naval intelligence that handles these sort of encounters, and there have been specific missions where our nuclear subs have gone out to track or to detect underwater extraterrestrial vehicles. ETVs is what they're called in the National Security Agency. But these have been going on for decades. I have several people who are on my team who are military folk who have been on these submarines when these events have happened. And it's not every day, but it's not unusual either. But these are, again, very classified. They're kept incredibly secret. And often it's intelligence gathering operations.
The world according to Jesse. We've got to take a quick break. When we return, Dr. Greer answers questions from you, the fans. We'll be right back. The world according to Jesse.
that country called Russia. No one has ever heard about that country. Never even have heard about Moscow.
There's something for you on your Sports HQ.
Do you know what you've got in your hand? You might think it's a phone, but in the news, we see it as TV. With Pluto TV, the free and unlimited TV app, you can get TV everywhere for free. And since TV is everywhere, so is RT. Streaming on all your favorite devices, outdoors or inside, any time of day or night. Catch all of our award-winning shows, news, and cutting-edge analysis everywhere you look and wherever you go. Question more.
You know, it doesn't really matter where you've been. What matters is where you're going, right? Will future generations look back at the establishment media as the lead in the water pipes that drove the Romans mad? Do you find yourself watching TV to turn your brain off, to relax? I want you to watch TV to turn your brain on. I'm Rick Sanchez. It's time to do news again.
Watching the Hawks is founded by 3 young Americans who love their country, but we have to constantly question our government.
Watching the Hawks brings you the stories that give voice to the voiceless. We dig a little deeper. We hit the stories that everyone else is afraid to touch, is afraid to talk about because they don't want to upset their corporate sponsors or interrupt their government access. Now is the time, more than ever, that we need to question more.
We're in this post-truth world where words have to matter again. It's about educating people and giving them context instead of telling them what to think. Dialogue is far more valuable than debate.
I've been saying the numbers mean something. They matter. The U.S. is over $20 trillion in debt. More than 10 white-collar crimes happen each day. 85% of global wealth belongs to the ultra-rich, 8.6%. Markets saw a 30% rise last year, some with 400 to 500 trades per second. And Bitcoin rose to $20,000. China's building a $2.1 billion AI industrial park. But don't let the numbers overwhelm you. The only number you need to remember is one. One business show you can't afford to miss. The one and only Boom Bust.
I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay tuned and question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. Welcome back as we continue our conversation with my guest, Dr. Greer. The world according to Jesse. I think you have a question for me now?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask is were you ever in, or did you know anyone who worked in what's called the Technology Management Office, the TMO, that's in one of the sub-basements of the Pentagon?
Well, I can honestly tell you this. I've only been in the Pentagon one time in my life.
Okay.
That was when I was governor, and I think I probably got the standard Pentagon walkthrough that probably any governor would get.
Gotcha.
You know, in my time in the service, I never saw the Pentagon. I was in San Diego, California, or deployed overseas for 17 months, so I can't talk to the Pentagon at all.
Well, you know, one time when I was at the Pentagon, I was briefing the head, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he had made inquiries into this issue and also had been lied to. He was furious, by the way. And also, on another meeting, I had astronaut Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, with me, and I was there with my military advisor. And I was briefing the head of intelligence, J2, for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So this is the man, he's the admiral who's in charge of the intelligence briefings for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had, through a document I published, found a unacknowledged special access project, secret project, dealing with UFOs, and he made an inquiry, and he was told, I'm quoting, they said, "Sir, you don't have a need to know." And he said, "God damn it, I'm the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. How can I not have a need to know?" And they said, "Sir, we will not discuss this with you further." And they hung up on him. So these are true. This is true. Every word I'm telling you is true. So I mean, this office, there is, you know, people don't realize nothing important is above the surface of the earth. It's underground. So they're in SCIFs, secure communication information facilities. But there's one in the Pentagon, and there's an office there called the Technology Management Office, or TMO, and that's where a lot of these projects are managed from.
You know, this is amazing, Stephen, because here you've got this guy with the Joint Chiefs, and he's being told by the government he doesn't have a need to know. That reminds me so much of when I did conspiracy theory, and we would go out and go after these conspiracies, and many involve the government. And I learned quick, you can't ask the government a question and expect to get an answer.
They get a straight answer.
One.
Yeah, right.
I feel good now knowing that this guy even got the runaround like I did, and I was a civilian.
Yeah, well, don't feel bad.
What was your other...
The president, I personally know of presidents of the United States that have gotten the runaround. So, you know, you're in good company.
Unreal. Now, you had a second question for me.
Well, I had also was wondering if you had any of your colleagues over the course of your career have encounters with an extraterrestrial being or a craft. Is this something you've heard people in your network talk about, or has it never come up?
Never. And the way I understood the question was, if I did get the encounter, what type of training did I get? Nothing. Okay. I went through a lot of training. I went through SEAL cadre. Sure. I went through SEER school, where I was essentially waterboarded. I went through jump school. I went through all of these schools. Never in my naval career was I ever told anything about ET or extraterrestrials or you know, UFOs or anything of that. We were too busy. We had an obligation in Southeast Asia that took most of our time up.
Sure. No, I am aware of that. This doesn't surprise me, but I know of some people who were involved in peripheral issues where the matter would come up. But, you know.
It could be. Anyway, since this is a special social media episode, I wanted our viewers to weigh in online. They've got some great questions, and they want me to ask you, Steve. Here it goes.
Sure.
Ronald Price asks, do you believe the government denies knowing about UFOs to make sure that big oil keeps its monopoly on oil-based energy rather than free energy that's available through dynamos used by ET crafts built by Adam Tremblay? Answer and explain what he means.
Yes, he's 100% correct. This is actually a technology and geopolitical story, and to answer it very quickly, the technologies that are behind the propulsion and energy system of what we call a UFO was figured out by 1954, which means that we have not needed oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, jet engines, rockets, internal combustion engines in cars since that date, which is, I was only not even alive in 1954. I was in a
I was 3.
All right, I was in a twinkle in my father's eye, man. So here's the deal. This has to do with geopolitical power, what I call the petro-Nazis, oil, the petrodollar itself, and all of the infrastructure that goes with it. Because if you disclose that these UFOs are real, the first thing a scientist is going to say, how are they moving at those speeds and making right-hand turns? How are they defying gravity?
Exactly.
Well, when that question gets asked, we have people who will answer it. And when it gets answered so that the whole world knows it, then it's the end of oil and coal and nuclear power. So that is that is a huge issue. It's a huge, big deal.
Steve, I'd say we're about 50 years late. We better get on it.
Well,
now, Old
yes.
Quiddy asks, how do you separate misinformation from truth regarding UFOs and ETs? How do you do that?
It's a very good question. I require 2 or 3 corroborating data points as well as documentation from a whistleblower, someone who has firsthand knowledge. A government document has to have a provenance associated with it. I don't deal with the rumor mill of nonsense. I would say more than 90% of everything that you will find on the internet on this subject is utter and complete nonsense and rubbish. I will say that. However, the 10% that isn't rubbish is of the most great significance, I mean, to the human future and also to our having a sustainable planet here. Because, look, these technologies are technologies that if they're put into application, we would have no poverty and no pollution within 20 years. We would have a sustainable civilization. We should have had that by the time you and I were born, Jesse. But here we are floundering around with oil war number X, Y, and Z and all the nonsense going on, when we really need to move on. But the money people, the big power centers are in the money and technology dealing with this issue. They're not at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue or on Capitol Hill. The big power is in the financial system.
Yeah, isn't it always? Follow the money.
Yep.
Another user asks, what do you know about the world's largest radio telescope in China? Do the Chinese give access to others?
Well, you know, the Chinese actually have been more open and forthcoming about UFOs than the United States. And I've met with a number of people in China, although they have compartmented operations dealing with this as well. Most of the big players on the financial and corporate stage don't want to rock the boat. And you talk about a disruptive technology, there are no disruptive technologies in Silicon Valley. These are the truly disruptive technologies. Now, they need to come out. So with the Chinese, with their radio telescope, I have no doubt that they have tracking mechanisms where they pick up UFOs all the time. I met with a senior ambassador from China years ago who confirmed this to me. Now, whether that particular radio telescope is purposed for that reason or not, I don't have any intelligence on.
And finally, Chris Jones asked, will the U.S. government ever give full disclosure about what they know about UFOs and aliens, or will it just trickle through from the heavenly redacted documents?
First of all, the government, which government? The government that we elect and have in there, they couldn't find their ass in a well-lighted room with both hands. So here's the problem. That's a terrible expression my dad gave me, but the fact of the matter is, it is in a compartmented, unacknowledged special access project system that really is not, it's not as if every member of the Senate Intelligence Committee or president can say, we have all the information, here it is. Because it isn't managed that way. It is highly compartmented. It's way past top secret. So the question is, how do you get this fixed? That's why I founded the Disclosure Project, to get people who have been in those projects to come forward as whistleblowers with documentation to put out to the public. If you go to our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, S-I-R-I-U-S disclosure.com, we have links to over 70 of these top secret witnesses and thousands of pages of documentation on our website. So I encourage people to go there, but what's more important is that people who've been in those projects, they need to come forward as patriots. It is an act of patriotism to stand up against a fascistic illegal level of secrecy. And I think that people need to do...
Dr. Greer, you got to watch out, because look what we do to whistleblowers. Whistleblowers end up in jail.
Well,
you know, that's what the government does to all of them.
I've been doing this since the 90s. I've been doing this since the 90s, and what we've been able to prove is that these projects are illegal, and if they touch us, it will be their worst nightmare in a court case.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Greer. That's all we have time for. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Maybe some of the stories we discussed today will be confirmed in the future, like they were the last time.
The world according to Jesse.
That's all for today's social media special. I'll be back next week with the final installment from this series, when I sit down with CIA whistleblower John Kiriakou to answer more questions from you, the viewers. Until then, remember, when the government lies, the truth becomes a traitor. Stay vigilant.
The world according to Jesse.